Hey guys, welcome back to Beyond the Box Score. I'm your host Hayat. Today is February 10th, and we've got 5 college basketball games that I've been circling all week. Here's the slate we're diving into. Purdue at Nebraska, Washington State Cougars at Gonzaga Bulldogs, Illinois vs. Wisconsin, Vanderbilt at Auburn, and Miami vs. North Carolina. Big road spots, tough home floors, high-level matchups, and a few lines that might not tell the full story, so we're going to unpack all of it. Before we tip off, real quick, if you like seeing this kind of full breakdown, raw analysis style, hit the like button and subscribe. It literally takes a second, and it helps the channel keep putting out these deep dives on every slate without cutting corners. Okay, the matchup here is Purdue at Nebraska and the lean is Nebraska minus points. Let me walk through why, because when I start talking this one out loud, the more it stacks in that direction for me and it keeps circling back to the same spot. If this matchup plays out like a typical Big Ten road and home split, I just keep landing on Nebraska here. Purdue is expected to be about a 2-point underdog at Nebraska. And that number alone already tells you something, because this is a Purdue program that wins 80% of their games, and yet they're walking into Lincoln as dogs. And yeah, Purdue barely beat Oregon as 4-point favorites not long ago, and that sticks with me because that was at home. Then you zoom out and Purdue was a big 18.5-point favorite last game and still didn't exactly inspire confidence, and now you're asking them to flip venues and handle a Nebraska team that is 12-1 at home this year. What connects for me is that Purdue has not been good on the road the last couple years, and that's not narrative fluff. That's a real, tangible issue when you drop them into one of the toughest home environments in the conference. Big Ten home court is historically one of the best home court edges in college basketball, and Nebraska fits that profile perfectly right now. If I think through Purdue's current form, it's messy. They lost 3 straight games recently, then followed that with back-to-back wins, but even in that stretch, they won last game by just 4. That's not dominance. That's survival. And when I layer in the betting profile, Purdue is 1-8 against the spread their last 9. 1-8. That matters to me because it tells me the market keeps overestimating what this team looks like on the floor versus the result we're actually getting. You can be a great program and still be a bad bet, and Purdue has been exactly that lately. Now flip this over to Nebraska. They're 12-1 at home this year, and they started the season 20-0. And honestly, they could be 22, 23-0 right now if a couple things swing differently. They just dropped a couple games in a row, losing to Michigan and losing to Illinois, and that's where I think people might be too quick to fade them. Against Michigan, Nebraska was down a starter, and they still gave Michigan a good battle without a starter. That matters in how I contextualize that loss. Then you look at the Illinois game, and the free throw disparity jumps off the page. Illinois had 26 free throw attempts. Nebraska had 5 free throw attempts the entire game. The entire game. If this matchup plays out even remotely differently from an officiating standpoint, that result can look very different. One path I see here is Nebraska being battle-tested in a way Purdue hasn't been recently. Nebraska has played by far the hardest schedule amongst top teams in the Big Ten. They are the only team in the top 10 in the Big Ten to have played a top 5 Big Ten schedule. That's not small. That's real seasoning. So when I hear people say Nebraska just dropped a couple games, my response is yeah, look at who they've played and how they've played them. They're tested. They're not fragile. And now they're back at home, where they've been elite all year. Zooming back out, this is 2 Big Ten powerhouses going head-to-head, but the situational angles are screaming at me. Purdue has not played well of late, they've been shaky against the number, they've been vulnerable on the road. And now they're stepping into a Nebraska home floor where the Cornhuskers are 12-1. Nebraska is at home, Nebraska is tested due to schedule. And Nebraska already showed me something by giving Michigan a good battle without a starter and dealing with an extreme free throw imbalance against Illinois. If this matchup plays out like a typical Big Ten home spot where energy matters, whistles normalize even a little, and the road team has to execute under pressure, I don't see Purdue suddenly fixing all of their road issues here. So when I keep thinking it through, talking it through, circling it again and again, the same conclusion keeps sticking. Purdue barely beat Oregon as 4-point favorites. Purdue was a big 18.5-point favorite last game and still didn't separate. Purdue is 1-8 against the spread their last 9, and Nebraska is 12-1 at home with the hardest schedule in the league. Yeah, that's why the lean sticks at Nebraska minus points. Let's move to next game, Washington State Cougars versus Gonzaga Bulldogs. The lean here is full game under. So let me just talk this out the way my brain is actually processing it. Because when I see Washington State Cougars headed into Spokane, Washington to play Gonzaga, the first thing that hits me is matchup, not spread, not hype, just matchup, and if this matchup plays out like I think it does, Washington State is going to be fighting uphill possessions all night. One path I see here is Gonzaga doing exactly what they've been doing defensively and Washington State running into the part of their profile that hurts them the most, which is the defensive side of the ball and then the offensive struggle that comes from facing a Gonzaga defense that can actually clamp down. And yeah, I get it, people want to talk spreads with Gonzaga, but that's exactly why I'm not picking a side here, because all season long these big numbers have been a mess. I mean, I keep replaying it in my head. Gonzaga laying 19.5 points versus Oregon State and they win by 20, sure, technically covered, but barely. Gonzaga laying 22.5 vs Portland and they lose outright. Gonzaga laying 26.5 vs Pepperdine and they win by 24. Gonzaga laying 15.5 vs San Francisco and they only win by 15. Gonzaga laying 24.5 vs Seattle and they win by 8. If this matchup plays out like those games, you're just sweating every possession if you're laying numbers. And I don't want that. What connects for me is that while the spreads have been ugly, the under has been money, and that's not just a small sample thing. That's under is 8-2 in their last 10 games, especially in conference play, and that matters to me because it tells me how Gonzaga is choosing to win games right now. One path I see is Gonzaga exploiting Washington State's defensive weaknesses, slowing the game down, forcing tough looks, and Washington State just struggling to score consistently. We've seen Washington State put up points here and there, sure, but if this matchup plays out like Gonzaga's defensive profile suggests, I just don't see it going their way offensively. That's why my brain keeps landing on Washington State team total under as well. Because Gonzaga defense expected to limit Washington State scoring is not just a narrative thing, it's how this team has been playing, especially in conference play where that under 8-2 run keeps showing up. And yeah, part of me wants to believe in Gonzaga, part of me wants to lay points. But it just hasn't been profitable, and I don't want to get caught in that trap again. So if this game plays out like Gonzaga controlling pace, Washington State struggling offensively, and the defensive side of the ball dictating possessions, the full game under just keeps making sense to me over and over again. That's why I'm not picking a side, that's why I'm avoiding laying big numbers with Gonzaga, and that's why the official play stays full game under. Yeah, that's why the lean sticks at full game under. Here is the next game between Illinois versus Wisconsin. The lean here is Wisconsin and the points. Alright, let me slow this one down and really think it through, because this is Big Ten Conference action at the State Farm Center, and if this matchup plays out like the profiles suggest, I think the market is just a little too aggressive on Illinois. Illinois comes into this 120-4 overall, 11-2 in conference play, coming off that 85-82 overtime loss to Michigan State, and before that, a blowout win over Northwestern, so I get why people look at this team and see power. They're the longest team in the country, first in average height, they've had a great conference season, and they shoot threes at the highest rate in the Big Ten. But one path I see here is Wisconsin being way more live than the line suggests. Wisconsin is 16-7 overall, 8-4 in conference play, coming off a 78-77 overtime loss to Indiana. And yeah, there was controversy at the end of that game, but zooming out, this team has won 7 of their last 9 games, and that matters to me. What connects for me is how Wisconsin has handled step-up road spots this season. They lost their first road game versus BYU, sure, but they also handed Michigan their first loss of the season, and that tells me this team doesn't shrink just because the building is loud. If this matchup plays out like Illinois wants it to, they're hitting threes at volume, but Wisconsin's three-point defense and perimeter defense have been very solid, and that's the counter. Illinois doesn't force turnovers, they focus on stopping clean looks defensively, and Wisconsin in conference play is still shooting threes at around 35%, So one path I see is Wisconsin contesting open jumpers just enough to keep this game from getting away. And when I look at the line, Illinois favored by 11, 12, around double digits, it just feels a little disrespectful to Wisconsin. I'm not calling for an outright upset here, I'm really not, but if this game plays out like a Big Ten grinder where possessions matter and shots are contested, I keep landing on Illinois winning by 8 or 9 points at most. That's the scenario that keeps replaying for me. Wisconsin keeping this game within single digits, competing, making Illinois earn every basket, and staying live the entire way. This is a big one for Wisconsin's tournament resume, and teams in that spot tend to show up with edge. So if this matchup plays out like Wisconsin contesting shots, Illinois not forcing turnovers, and the game living in that physical Big Ten space, grabbing Wisconsin and the points just keeps making sense to me. Yeah, that's why I'm not predicting the outright upset, but I am taking Wisconsin and the points. And that's why the lean stays Wisconsin and the points. Quick pause real quick, if even one of these breakdowns has helped you see a game a little clearer, hit the like button. It lets me know these full slate, think it through breakdowns are actually worth doing. And if you've been watching these videos but haven't subscribed yet, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. It takes a second on your end, but it helps this channel way more than you think and keeps these deep dive college hoops breakdowns coming. Alright, back to the games. Next game we have Vanderbilt versus Auburn, the lean here is Auburn. Okay, so Vanderbilt headed into Auburn, Alabama, into the jungle, to play the Auburn Tigers, and if this matchup plays out like the situations and patterns we've already seen this season, I keep circling back to Auburn here without wanting to overthink it. Both of these teams are coming off tough losses on Saturday, and that context matters to me because Vanderbilt's loss was at home against Oklahoma where they were 11.5-point favorites and still lost outright, which is just brutal, and Auburn's loss was also at home, against Alabama, a rivalry game, and Auburn lost that one outright too, which now makes it back-to-back losses for Auburn. One path I see here is Auburn responding in the jungle, which is still one of the toughest places to play, against a Vanderbilt team that just has not handled step-up road spots well at all. What connects for me is Vanderbilt's actual road resume in conference play. Yes, they went on the road and beat South Carolina, cool, and yes, they went on the road and beat Mississippi State, also cool, but every single time this Vanderbilt team has gone on the road and taken a step up in competition, it's been ugly. If this matchup plays out like those games, it's a problem. They went into Austin, Texas to play the Longhorns, they were 3.5-point favorites in that game, and they lost 80-64. They went into Arkansas and lost 93-68. Those weren't close, those were decisive losses, and that trend is screaming at me when I think about Vanderbilt going into Auburn, into the jungle, against an Auburn team coming off back-to-back losses, including a loss to Alabama, their rival. One path I see is Auburn playing with urgency, feeding off the home crowd, and catching Vanderbilt in the exact type of spot where Vanderbilt has struggled all season long. Yeah, Vanderbilt might have some nice flashy numbers if you just glance at a stat sheet, but what connects for me is that when the competition level goes up on the road, this team has not just lost, they've gotten rocked. And if this matchup plays out like Auburn protecting home court in one of the toughest places to play, with Vanderbilt repeating the same road issues they had at Texas and at Arkansas, I think Auburn catches them here. I'm not trying to get cute with it, I'm not trying to invent a narrative that isn't already there, I'm just following the pattern we've seen. So yeah, that's why I'm on Auburn, and that's why the lean sticks at Auburn. Here is last game of my video, Miami versus North Carolina, the lean here is North Carolina. So now let's shift to Miami versus North Carolina. And if this matchup plays out like the profiles and the matchup dynamics suggest, I keep landing on North Carolina getting the job done. Miami comes into this one with a record of 18-5 on the year, 7-3 in conference play, coming off a 74-68 road win over Boston College, and they've put together some solid results under Jay Lucas, no doubt about it. But what connects for me is who they've actually done this against. North Carolina is 19-4. Also 7-3 in conference play, coming off that 71-68 win over Duke, which was a thriller, a nail-biter, a last-second victory where Duke led by a healthy margin for much of the game and North Carolina closed it out late. Now North Carolina is going on the road, And sure, there's talk of a potential letdown spot after a rivalry win versus Duke, and I get that concern, but if this matchup plays out like the strengths and weaknesses line up, I still have questions about Miami here. One path I see is Miami being forced to prove something they haven't proven yet. They lost their toughest conference test on the road against Clemson, and they lost that game by double digits. And when I zoom out even more, Miami does not have a win over a team inside the Ken Pom top 65. Their best win was a road win over Ole Miss, and depending on where you slot teams like Syracuse or Wake Forest, those road wins exist too, but the point is, they haven't really beaten top-tier ACC competition yet. Style-wise, this is where it really connects for me. Miami does not shoot a ton of threes, they're heavily reliant on two-point buckets, and now they're facing North Carolina, the third tallest team in the country, a team that rebounds the ball really well, and a team whose two-point defense is ranked 5th nationally. If this matchup plays out like Miami trying to score inside against that size and the two-point defense, I just have concerns they haven't seen this kind of length and physicality consistently. North Carolina may be on the road, and it may not be easy. But one path I see is North Carolina avoiding the letdown, leaning on their size, their rebounding, and that 5th nationally ranked two-point defense to wear Miami down. I'm not saying it's comfortable, I'm not saying it's smooth, but when all is said and done, I think North Carolina walks out with the victory here. And yeah, that's why the lean stays North Carolina. Alright, that's gonna wrap it up for all 5 college basketball matchups on February 10th. As always, this was analysis and opinion only, nothing guaranteed, nothing promised, just me walking through how these games could play out if the matchups, the spots, and the game flow line up the way they look on paper. I'm really curious how you're seeing this slate, so drop AZ in the comments and let me know which game you're most confident in or which matchup you're reading differently. I read every comment, and a lot of the best conversations happen down there. More breakdowns coming soon, same raw format, same think out loud approach, same deep dives. I'll catch you in the next one.